I'll start then. This is the RCEA meeting of May 25th, 2023. And we have a number of folks in person and also online. And so at this point, I'm going to let the clerk, who is going to be Christy, go ahead and start with the housekeeping.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Human Resources Manager Christy Sino speaking. We have a few housekeeping announcements before we get started this afternoon. For those of you here at Jefferson Center, the microphones will be on throughout the meeting and they're very sensitive. Please do not mute them and please try not to speak while someone else has the floor. Online phone participants cannot hear what's being said when people are speaking over each other. When speaking, please identify yourself for the benefit of remote participants. Online committee members and staff, please unmute your microphones and turn on your cameras when you're speaking. For community members participating in the public comment periods, please come up to the podium so the microphone picks up your voice. Online participants, please click raise hand button in the webinar controls, and phone participants press *9 to raise your hand. The chair or staff will prompt you when it's your turn to speak. Public comment may be limited to 3 minutes at the chair's discretion. Emailed public comments are accepted before and during the meeting at publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org. Online participants, if you experience phone or internet disruptions during this meeting, please notify us if possible by calling or texting 707-382-7110 or by emailing publiccomment@redwoodenergy.org. That's all for announcements.
All right. Thank you, Christy. So today we have, like I said, we have some folks of the board in person and some online, and some may be coming a little bit later. So we're going to be a little bit more hyper about who's in the room and because we're having quorum issues. So how about Christy, can you do the roll call?
I can. Director Arroyo is participating remotely.
Yes, I think I need to make a just cause announcement. Is that so?
No, that's only for emergency. So.
Oh, okay, great.
Director Arroyo is joining us remotely due to illness. Director Arroyo, do you have anybody in the room over 18 with you?
I do not, although you might see me talking to my dog. So if you see me talking, it's I'm trying to shush my dog.
Thank you. Director Bauer. Not here. Director Jorgensen.
Here.
Director Mobley.
Here.
Director Myers is not present. Director Scafani.
Here.
Vice Chair Schaefer.
Here.
Director Tuttle.
Here.
Director Wilson.
Here.
And Chair Wu.
Here.
We have quorum.
Okie dokie. So next up on the agenda is item 1.1 to approve the teleconference participation request for this meeting by director pursuant to the Brown Act revisions AB 2449. We do have to do this. Is that right, Christy?
You don't have to take a vote since we don't have an emergency circumstance.
Perfect. So the agenda says approve, but we just don't have to do that.
Sorry, am I remembering that correctly?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah.
That's just there in case.
Okay, got it. All right, next up then is item 2, reports from member entities. So at this time, does anybody first I'll do the room and then go out to online. Go ahead, Chris.
We had a CAC meeting on May 9th, and it was chosen to do 2 ad hoc committees, one to help with the major planning in the community, and the second one to help with Humboldt's Electric Future community input, which there's going to be an outreach meeting to get input from community members. Chair Leonardi also recommended that we pay close attention to the Turlock Irrigation District solar panel experiment. It is combining the aqueduct with solar. So after I hadn't heard of it before, after I left here, I did some research on it. It's pretty interesting.
Hey, Chris, anybody else in the room? Okay, and how about online? Is there anybody, Natalie?
No, thank you.
Okie dokie. Then I'm going to, is there any comments from the public on reports from member entities?
I see no hands raised. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so I'm going to close reports from member entities, moving on to oral communications. This time is provided for people to address the board or submit written communications on things that are not on the agenda. At the conclusion of this oral communications, we can respond to statements, but anything that requires action will have to be put on to a future agenda. So at this time, is there anybody in the room that would like to address the board under oral communications? I don't see anybody. And how about online?
I don't see anybody.
All right, then I'm going to close oral communications and go on to consent calendar. All matters on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the board and are generally enacted in one motion. But if we want to discuss something separately, then we pull that from the consent calendar, approve the others, and then go back to that item. So we have 4.1, approve minutes of April 27th meeting. 4.2, approve the disbursements report. 4.3, accept the financial reports. And 4.4, accept fiscal year 22-23 budget update and quarterly budget report through Q3. So is there anybody here in the room up on the board who wants to pull anything from consent? Nope. Okay, and how about online? Natalie shaking no.
No, thank you.
So let's see here, then we go out to the public, and is there anybody in the public who would like to pull anything from consent?
I see no hands raised.
All righty. In that case, I don't have anything either. So I think we need a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Did you get that, Chris?
I did.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
By Mobley and second by Scafani.
Yep. Roll call vote.
Okay. Director Arroyo,
Yes.
Director Bauer is not here. Director Jorgensen,
Aye.
Director Mobley,
Yes.
Director Myers is not here. Director Scafani,
Yes.
Vice Chair Schaefer,
Yes.
Director Tuttle,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Chair Wu,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Next up, we have some new business, and it's item 6.1 to hear a presentation by Dr. Sharon Kramer from H.C. Harvey Associates on something that's called Sea Stories at Department of Energy Fund Wind Community Engagement Project. So this is information only, but I've been pretty much looking forward to this, having missed it at the Sustainable Futures series. So do you want to start it off, Matthew?
Yeah, I'll just give like a real quick introduction. So if you do not know Sharon Kramer and H.T. Harvey Associates, they're a large firm. They have a office here in Arcata and are I would say international leaders on sort of environmental permitting issues related to offshore renewable energy and lots of other things, but in the context of this offshore renewable energy. And they're part of a team that got a federal grant to develop an app and engagement tools for sort of community engagement around offshore wind. And so this is just an informational item, but to hear about that project and its sort of implications. And with that, we'll hand it over to you, Sharon, and it looks like we can see you and hopefully hear you.
Great. Can you hear me all right?
Yes. Sharon, do you want me to introduce you any farther?
If you want to.
Okay, well, I will because really taking advantage of this little time here. So Sharon Kramer is a PhD in fisheries biology. We go pretty far back, Sharon and I, and I'm so pleased that she can be here with us. The work that she's been doing is this for offshore wind and just wave energy, just renewable energy in general has been, well, for this offshore wind, I would say over 10 years, maybe 10 to 15 years. This is not just something that she just happened on, when offshore wind is looking like it might come here. This has been something that HD Harvey's been positioning for a really long time. And so I think that they're also, even though they're actually kind of a small company, I think they're fewer than 100 maybe,
Mhm.
but just how such a small company can really impact, development here off the coast. How was that, Sharon? Did I get it mostly right?
Mostly right. My PhD's in marine biology, but that's
thank
close
you.
enough.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherry. Yeah, I'll just dive in. Yeah, HD Harvey is a small firm. We're about 80 people. And we, go back to that slide because I need to introduce my partners because it's not a one person, not a one company team. We were awarded a DOE, Department of Energy Small Business Innovation Research Grant, SBIR grant, which goes to small businesses. And at the time, Integral Consulting, Dr. Grace Chang, she was the PI for this project, and they were a small company and are not anymore. So we received a phase 1 funding to do this as a sort of a test case. So you're not going to see a fully fledged out project, but I'll show you what the start is. And they're no longer a small business, so we couldn't apply to phase 2. So one of the things we are looking for is to continue this work into the future. And so we are kind of getting out there, getting the word out and seeing what people think about it. And I should also acknowledge Dr. Ben Best with EcoQuants, and he's the guy who makes the software work, makes the app work, and the three of us work really well together. So I really definitely have to give those guys credit, and you'll get some other credits too you'll see. So let's go to the next slide. Thanks. And thank you for inviting me. So our DOE SBIR was to develop a user-friendly data dashboard to support basically marine renewable energy projects for the communities. We wanted the communities to be empowered with the information they need to understand sort of and be able to engage in discussions about their sense of what is working, what's not working, what they need to know, what they would like out of a project, and really to help the projects move forward in an informed way so we know the community is involved through every step of the way. And so our community partners for this project were the Redwood Community Action Agency, and actually we worked with Natalie on this, so yay, Natalie. And we had a test community, which was Santa Barbara, and we worked with Santa Barbara Maritime Museum for that. So the community partners were incredibly important to make this work. So, kudos to both for sure. Let's go to the next slide. So what we did was we basically said, how are we going to get communities to participate in a meaningful way in renewable energy planning and development? And what we mean by that is we need information to come into communities, information and packaged in a way that is useful. That's why the little phone with the fingers, people need to be able to access it really simply and easily. And then how they can communicate their issues and concerns back out. So information in, their concerns back out, and do it in a way that's really easy. So let's go to the next slide. So this is sort of a test phase 1 project. And what we did, so if you go to seastories.app, it'll take you to this page. And this is what we've put together. This is the little tool. And the first front page just shows has the PowerPoints and information from the 2 sets of workshops we did. We did set in September of 2022 at both Eureka. Thank you, RCA, again, for setting that up and inviting the people that were participating, and one in Santa Barbara. And then we listened. Those were listening sessions. We kind of threw a bunch of ideas out. We asked some questions, poll everywhere. And we heard what people said that they wanted to see in something like this tool. And then we went back and we quickly, this was a very short project, 9 months. We quickly put together what we thought we heard, and then presented that again just this February in Eureka and in Santa Barbara. So basically, it's very simple proof of concept And it was really, really a fun, interesting project to do. So the website is, you get this on the front page, but the beta version's sort of what we actually heard and what we put together. So if you go to the next slide. So I will say before I go to the beta version, and you can all play with your phone right now if you want to and do this. I'm going to lose you if you do, but we did ask a series of poll everywhere questions to kind of gauge from the community what they wanted. And this is just a snippet of some of the responses that we got. And for example, on the upper left, how would you react to the news that an offshore wind energy project's being proposed for your local water? And it was great. People were, generally interested, excited, like we said, happy, excited, concerned also is there, hopeful, optimistic. So it was generally a really good sense of community input on the kind of excitement and interest in offshore wind. Second question we asked, what are the big benefits as a result of offshore wind development? A lot of people really focused on carbon reduction and climate change, which is really great, but you'll see energy diversification and community benefits and a few other things pop up there. And then to the bottom now, some of the questions we asked are a little more about what are you concerned about? First, what are your biggest concerns? And interestingly, it was impacts on wildlife. And we thought perhaps it might end up being, costs, higher energy costs, impacts to community resources showed up, impacts to fishing, but really environmental impacts was a very big deal. And then sort of what information did you wish you had about offshore wind energy development? And again, wildlife impacts, community benefit requirements popped up, and environmental impacts. Distribution was of interest. There are a whole bunch of interesting kind of comments about being bypassed, so power being exported out of the community as well. So these are kinds of responses that we got, just like I say, in a poll everywhere, asking the community sort of, series of questions. So let's go to the next slide. The other thing we heard loud and clear at these early meetings, and actually, Natalie was very involved in the first meeting in Eureka, was people wanted it to be easy. They didn't want to search. They didn't want to Google search and get sent to 15 or 50 different websites and then try to figure out which ones make sense. And some of them are too technical and some of them are too, anyway, just this whole series of information, whole bunches of information that were really hard to disseminate and try to figure out what's accurate, what makes sense, it's too technical. So we heard very loud and clear that they wanted something easy, something they could use their phone to access. And so this is sort of this is now, if you do the beta link on the web page, you get this. And we had 4 basic pieces that we developed: a chat. And we heard loud and clear that people wanted to be able to punch a question into their phone and get an answer. And so we'll go to this in a minute. Be able to comment back. So be able to say something about what they read or heard. And that's another feature that we've provided. So there's your information back out, or sharing information about concerns. There's infographics. So people were saying they didn't know much about these projects, like how big they are, how long is it going to take for them to be built? What are the components? So the infographics are just, again, I'll show you a couple examples. They're very simple. And then news. People wanted to be able to have an access the news, and they wanted it all in one place, not having to search all different places to find news on this specific issue, whether it be local or just about offshore wind in general. So those 4 components. Let's go to the next page. Okay, here's just an example really briefly of 2 things: the chat and the infographics. The chatbot is ChatGPT 3.5, and you can type in a question and get an answer. So example here is, what's the scale of the Morro Bay wind energy area? And it will pop out, it's 25,000 acres. We did learn, and we actually, if you do go to the site and you do use the chatbot, we are recording and keeping all of the Q&A so that we can kind of get a sense of how accurate responses were. And it's pretty funny, actually, but it's really interesting to see. And as the ChatGPT improves over time, with another version of this, we would start to kind of train it we would want to train it because right now it kind of can give you some strange answers, and you'll see that at the end when we talk about ChatGPT. Infographics are very simple. The community wanted to be able to just see an image and be able to click on it and get some information. And so we have everything from Viewshed, for example, which people, you can find it online. It's on the BOEM website, but you really kind of have to dig for it. Boom, put it in one place where people can see what the Viewshed is going to look like. Again, we didn't invent the information. We just made it in one place where people could find it easily. And then the second infographic is whale interactions. And we showed, it's not to scale, but an offshore wind project and all the components. You can click on every component and it will tell you about the components. There's links to videos, there's links to actual acoustic information. So you can listen to whale sounds, you can listen to recordings of offshore wind, fixed foundation wind projects off of Europe. So there's just a lot of information all in one place, and the components of the project. So it's a fun infographic with a lot of information. All right, let's go to the next slide. News was also one thing we heard. Our news is basically gives you anything about offshore wind right now, but you can actually filter it. So you can just look at Humboldt's information on offshore wind, or Europe, or a place off the Atlantic, New Jersey. So you can start to filter it and get the information you want. So it's not just this overload of information. So that's something I think we heard that people really liked as well. And then the next slide. So yeah, our takeaways really were that everybody felt that the process for offshore wind projects, whether it's through NEPA or CEQA or the BOEM leasing process, was a little bit. Oops, sorry, I missed that.
There's somebody playing a piano down the hallway. So I'm impressed you could hear that online. So.
Oh yeah, it was loud.
These
Okay.
microphones are good, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm going to finish up pretty quick here. So, but we heard loud and clear they wanted to be involved early on, to really understand what's happening and not be brought in through the process that's more formal, because it's too much information. It's too the time, it's inconvenient. It's not a simple process. Many of the people that participated had never participated in any of these processes, CEQA, NEPA, because they were too difficult. The times weren't right. Everybody knows it's hard to get yourself to read hundreds of pages of information. And the community was interested, definitely. And we heard that loud and clear. So I think the tools that we need to develop have to communicate some pretty technical, sometimes and difficult information in a simple, easy, manageable, digestible way. And that's something that we felt we made some strides. Let's go to the next slide. And then after we demoed the beta version, we all had fun and we all got a laugh out of how the chatbot hallucinates. So it'll give you some pretty bizarre answers to things. If it doesn't say, I don't know, it'll make up an answer. And we're hoping that if we continue this project into the future, that we work in the newer versions of chatbot that allow you to train the chatbot so it doesn't do that, hopefully. But we definitely can take advantage of that technology. The other thing we heard that people were interested in is that they can't track all the things that are happening. Like if they want to go to an event that has to do with offshore wind or port development or something to do with any of those things, they can't find a place where all those things are on a calendar that are local. And so we heard that they really would like to see a calendar that has all this in one place, like all the things that could happen that they can go to. They also said that they're interested in some kind of analysis of trade-offs. Like if you were looking at community benefits, if you were thinking about it, what if I decided that I wanted, I need new dock space or new this, and then what's the trade-off with that? So there could, we're going to get 100 new jobs. So what does that mean for our capacity to build 100 new houses? So I mean, these kinds of trade-off tools were something that we heard was very interesting. And then also the key one, especially at Humboldt, was they don't want all our energy that's produced here to go completely out of the area. So, you know, the benefit of the costs that we pay to have the new energy developed here, they want to benefit from it too. So, and this is all new news, not new news to people. So we heard that loud and clear. And I think, again, we just had 2 community meetings with in 2 different locations, and got through our phase 1 and are looking for opportunities to continue the project. And I just wanted to communicate that to you guys, since I know you guys are interested also, obviously, in renewable energy sources and community involvement. So that's all I want to say. Thank you for letting me give that report.
Thank you, Sharon. So I guess, if you don't mind, Sharon, can we, I'm going to ask the board if they have any questions, and then ask online board members, and then take it out to the public. Yeah,
Sure.
okay. Yeah, well, Matthew first, is there anything else that staff would like to add?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, great. So questions, comments? Go ahead, Frank.
Well, this is a beta version. Are we able to go to this currently live? Is there a-
Correct. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we're
you
about,
can
we're
go
about,
right on it on your phone right now if you want, and not pay any attention to me. So
is the web address in the PowerPoint here that I'm over?
yeah, you can actually just type in C as the letter C, cstories.app, and you'll funnel to that longer website. Integral's hosting it. But yeah, just cstories.app will get you there.
C is in the SEAC,
No, like in the
as in
letter
the
C.
letter
the letter
C.
C.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Does that stand for like community? Is that what
Yes.
Send the link out. How about we send,
Yes.
how about we send the link out? We'll send the
Yeah.
link.
Yeah, but if you send a link, that would make it.
Yeah,
Thank
it's just C stories. Yeah.
Looks like there's some good, particularly on the news and, you know, some of those infographics. Thank you.
Yeah, we tried really hard to make those infographics. Like if you click on the whale, you can get whale sounds. You can get there's some pretty cool graphics showing a mother and baby humpback whale swimming through a project to give you a scale, an idea of the scale. We didn't make those. We just put them all together in an infographic, and people seem to like it. So
Any other questions from up here? I have a question. So you may not know the answer to this, but so that I get it that this is the beta version. And so at some point, right, we want, this will be, you know, live, we hope, or what is the actual plan, and who would be supporting this so that, you know, I mean, this is an ongoing years-long thing to keep content current.
yeah,
Right.
so when we originally, again, proposed this to DOE, SBIR grants are multi-phase. And usually if you get phase 1 and you succeed, which is kind of what we just did, I won't say it's a shoe-in, but then you apply for phase 2 funding, which actually allows you to build a commercialized project, a product. So theoretically, if we could have applied for phase 2, which we couldn't because Integral as the lead is not a small business anymore, we would develop it fully and commercialize it. And when I say that, we could either make it available through a developer to use, or, you know, it would be a tool that somebody could use and probably have to pay some sort of, again, service fee or some small fee just to, like you said, it has to be kept up and it has to be, yeah, otherwise it becomes dated. But honestly, I think the whole idea of it is to get it out there and get people using it. And we are pitching it right now to DOE, to NREL, NREL's DOE, Energy Commission. We've been, yeah, we're looking for partners, funding to continue this on to a full version. This is just a phase 1, which was a proof of concept. Mhm.
Gotcha. Any questions from board members online? Natalie?
No, I just appreciate it. It was cool to be a part of this, which was prior to my time on this board. But yeah, it was it was neat to be involved and to kind of think about this from a perspective of how to really effectively depict some pretty rich data sets in a way that is very interesting and compelling and usable for the general public. So it was cool. Thank you.
Mhm. And I'll bring it out to the public now. Is there anybody in the room who has questions or comments on this item? Seeing any. And Nancy, is there anybody out in online land?
Out here in online land, there is nobody raising their hand to comment on this particular subject, but I did miss one thing of public comment that we received for items not on the agenda, and those were a couple of emails that we received from Jesse Noel, and they are on the Board of Directors page. You'll see those as public comment in the section on the Board of Directors page. One of them was regarding support for care level, net energy metering, rooftops and other structures, solar support for care folks. So if you want to look at those public comments, that's where those are.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So take it back up to the board. I have a question for staff, and that is, so if this project keeps moving along, is there any budget for us that we could add into like other groups that would come under, I don't know what even the budget line item would
It'd
be.
be like outreach or
Yeah.
education, which we do have a budget for. I don't know what the price tag is. So
Mhm. Like I said, some small part.
we could follow up on that, and I could talk with Sharon about what kind of the next steps look like and what they're looking at. So
Yeah,
Okay.
happily. Mhm.
And it's the rest of the board kind of on.
Oh, yeah,
Okay with
it
that?
sounds cool. And I think it seems like a useful tool, even for like us as board members, when things come up and we're like, oh, I wonder about that. So, I mean, for the public, for people semi-professionally adjacent to offshore wind and everything, I think it's great.
All right. Thanks. Yeah, so that'd be direction to staff. Great. All right. Anything else on this before we move on to the next one? Nope. Okay, thank you, Sharon.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Take care.
Okay, moving on to CE business. And so I think we have a quorum, right?
We do.
Okay, all right. So there is no old CCE business, but there is new CCE business. So 8.1.
yeah, and I'm going to hand it over to Richard to cover this. And if it goes too long, we'll cue the piano music to.
I know, that was terrible. We have a piano player standing by.
Yeah.
It's for you.
As played out in the CAC meeting recently, I'm a little challenged by the feng shui of this room, where if I'm up there, it's kind of hard for me to look.
Your back is to the thing. Yeah.
Is it okay with the board if I take a seat at the?
I'm totally good on that. And then it seems like the microphone is fine, but Nancy, you could probably tell us if you could,
Okay,
you can't hear Richard.
it's okay with everyone?
Yeah, perfect.
So far, so good.
I know.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken. I wanted to follow up with the board on a couple of items related to power procurement decisions. This really kind of falls into two parts. First of all, let me start with this graphic, because this is something we've had up on our website for a while, and it tells the happy then not so happy then happy again story of our renewable energy and carbon-free procurement progress. So what you can see is the green parts of the bars are renewable energy. The blue part is what we always call carbon-free, which almost always refers to large hydropower that doesn't count as renewable, but is free of carbon emissions. The board set us a goal early on to have our portfolio consist entirely of renewables and carbon-free energy, a combination of those by 2025. This graph shows us getting there by 2025. And the first 3 years of the program, we were way ahead of state procurement requirements and even ahead of the board's more ambitious procurement goals. So those first 3 years were a good story of, steadily increasing renewables, and we had almost eliminated that gray the mystery meat part of the portfolio. But when 2020 hit, the pandemic came along. There was also, along with the pandemic, a big spike in wholesale power costs, and the retail rates, namely PG&E's rates, which we peg our rates to, did not keep up with the increases in wholesale power costs. At the same time, we had the pandemic, making a lot of people unable to keep up on paying their utility bills. So we lost a lot of revenues. So the combination of those things really caused a downturn in our finances, and the board made some important and quick decisions on the fly to, keep the wheels on the bus by temporarily reducing our renewable and carbon-free procurement. So we had to do that for a couple of years. The good news now is that the 2022 bar that you see there, which is a near final accounting of our resources from 2022. It does take a few months into each new calendar year to really settle the books on what happened with procurement. But, it's looking like we're well back on track in 2022. So much so that we're ahead of a little bit of where our original trajectory for 2023 was headed. So the chart shows us going back down a little bit in 2023, but that's right now our goal is 48% renewables for the current year is the key thing to capture there. The reasons why we need to come back to you now with some additional challenges to talk about for 2023, although some of those challenges I just mentioned are pretty much behind us now. The new challenges specific to renewable procurement. One is, as we've already talked to the board about, there's been continuing delays to that Sandrini solar project, which once it's fully online is going to provide around 45% of all our electricity. And it was supposed to have been online originally by late last year. It's just still in early construction phases, and with the holdup in delivery of the solar panels due to some issues with importing solar panels and being able to document that they're compliant with current laws on imported solar materials, the project is looking now like it's delayed into the first quarter of next year. Meanwhile, it's not a simple matter to go out and replace that renewable energy at a reasonable price, because there's been a new price spike, which is not wholesale power, but specifically the price of renewable energy attributes has gone up by something like 2.5%. By 2.5 times in just the past couple of quarters. So there's been a big change there. And another thing that's kind of challenging to us now is that carbon-free, that hydropower typically mostly comes out of the Pacific Northwest. And although we've just had this, banner year for precipitation in California and are looking at having a good hydro year in California, it's still the case that most of the hydropower that programs like us purchase comes out of the Pacific Northwest from the Columbia and Snake River basins and surrounding watersheds. And they're actually having an off year up there, which is kind of hard to believe compared to how things have gone in California. And another thing that challenges the availability of that is that other Western states are catching up with California on setting goals for carbon-free energy procurement. So whereas it used to be easy for California to just pick up the phone and say, hey, Oregon, Washington, send us your hydropower, they're like, well, we want to hang on to it now because we've got our own goals to meet. So that's another layer of challenge here. I've got some procurement options that we've modeled that we want to talk to you about. And the first three here are just kind of coming out of those last couple of slides that we just went through, which is how to address the unforeseen cost increases that we're seeing for getting to the end of 2023 with our renewable procurement goals intact. The next couple of options at the bottom of the slide there are a separate but related topic. And this comes out of the request that Supervisor Arroyo brought up a couple of months ago, wanting to see some analysis of what it would take for us to charge ahead and meet our 100% renewable and carbon-free or renewable energy goals early, get ahead of that 2025 trajectory. So we did some analysis on that as well. So those first three that we want to look at, and all of this with some graphs showing what these look like and the financial impacts associated with them. The first one is to just kind of stop where we are now and not procure any more renewables beyond what we have so far, less than halfway into the year. We could do that and still meet our state goals for what we're supposed to hit in renewable procurement over the current compliance period. A second option would be to just kind of meet where the state's renewable portfolio standard expects us to be in the current year. And a third would be to stick to your board's more ambitious, higher renewable and carbon-free procurement targets. So we're going to look at those three. And then as far as the accelerated renewables, we're going to look at one option where we procure a mix of 100% renewable and carbon-free energy, and another where we procure just renewable energy alone. So this would be effectively, as Supervisor Arroyo described it, kind of opting everybody up. So we'll take a look at how these all play out. So the colors are different in these slides, but the yellow bars are renewable, and the dark gray is carbon-free. And that other little bar up at the top is replacement carbon-free, which means basically just getting enough combined renewables and carbon-free to get up to the total combined level of those under the target that the board has set for us. So what you can see here is just, how much of the energy would be renewable and how much of it would be carbon-free, and the parts that are, blank above those bars would be presumably made up with just the system power. So layering onto that, this is how our annual net revenue for the current year could be impacted. This is all just for 2023 that we're looking at here. So the blue line there just shows for each of these scenarios how we would expect to end the current year in terms of net revenue. And so you can see that the only scenario where we come out in the red for the current year is that most ambitious 100% renewables goal. The staff recommendation, having looked at this, is that second scenario, what's called the linear RPS target here. So that would mean that for this year, we just basically do the minimum to meet the state's requirements. And again, I'll mention we've talked about this before, these compliance periods that the state sets are multi-year periods, and 2024 is the last year of the current period. So we have another year to make up any shortfall that we have in the overall compliance period. And we do expect that Andrini Solar Project to be online, not too far into next year. So that would give us a big boost. This graph is basically the same, except it's just the dollars or cumulative net revenue. So as a reminder, when we launched our CCE program, the board was asking us to basically sock away $35 million by the end of year 5. We're a little bit past that now. We're in year 6, but under the most kind of cost conservative scenario here, where we stop procuring renewables and just look to make up any shortfall in the coming year, we would come in right at about hitting that $35 million target this year. The other scenarios all have us coming in lower, but even the most ambitious, if we were to hit the accelerator and go to 100% renewable, we would still end the year with positive money in the bank cumulatively. One more thing I want to show you is this is looking out into the next couple of years beyond 2023. And this is just looking at those last 3 scenarios in there. And so this is kind of getting at Supervisor Arroyo's question, because we see 2025 is the year when we would expect to be at 100% renewable and carbon-free anyway. So the blue bar, which is our current targets, and the gray bar, which is that 100% renewable and carbon-free, essentially become one and the same by 2025, since that's the target that the board has already set for us. See that in 2023, in the current year, if we were to strive for 100% renewable, as we saw a couple slides back, we would be in the red for the current year. Because we don't have that Sandrini project online yet, we'd have to go out into the market and buy those expensive renewable energy certificates. But in 2024 and 2025, assuming Sandrini comes online according to the timeline that the developer's now telling us, we would make a lot of that up and still be in pretty good shape financially, even with that most ambitious scenario. So again, the staff recommendation is the linear RPS target, just kind of coming in where the state asks us to be. One other thing I wanted to touch on was, as you know, we set our retail rates, just pegging them to a set discount below PG&E's. If we were to look at this in terms of cost recovery from customers, and if we were to make rate adjustments to basically recover the same annual net revenue as where the board has us aiming now, you can see that in 2023, that would take a hefty rate increase because of that financial shortfall. But after that, it's not so severe. And if we were to just go with renewable and carbon free, because the carbon free resources are considerably less expensive than renewable energy certificates, it's only a pretty slight rate impact in that case. So there's our staff recommendation, and happy to hear any comments and questions.
I'll just, before we go, just add two comments. One is just as a reminder, our procurement is on a calendar year basis, while as our budget is on a fiscal year, July to June basis. So the numbers don't always kind of, you have to sort of blend fiscal years. So, those numbers don't show up in like the actual like budget, but think of it in relative terms. I mean, so that it's split between the tail end of this fiscal year and the first half of the coming fiscal year. But just as a reminder that it's not talking about the exact numbers that are in the budget, but the relative impacts are the same. And the one other just note is that the board's 2025 target of 100% renewable and carbon-free hydropower, that's the equivalent of the state's 2045 target. So just for context, the board's target is hitting the state's goals like 2 decades early. So to put it in perspective.
Thank you, Matthew. I assume there will be questions from the board. Oh,
Natalie has her hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Natalie.
Thank you. Just to clarify a couple things. So when you say renewable and carbon, or when you say 100% renewable, but not carbon free, does that category of 100% renewable include the like locally produced biomass from burning wood waste? Essentially, is that considered a renewable but not a carbon-free renewable?
Yes, we stick with the state's definitions here. So anything that's considered RPS, renewable portfolio standard, by the state's definitions is considered renewable. And we do have that contract going out to 2031 for the biomass. So all of our scenarios here assume that we continue to procure that local biomass power.
Okay, so we have a contract for 2031 for that. Are any of these scenarios making the assumption that we would procure more of that particular source?
No.
Okay. I guess I'm not, being so new, I'm not familiar with what the background is from the board on that particular source, but I'll just say that that's not a great option in my book, but I want to hear from others and from the public, obviously. And so the staff recommendation, sorry, I need to make sense of a couple of things. I can come back to it, but my last question for now is around the profit per se. I realize that like any profit gets, reinvested for community, needs, but that projection that showed that if we went to 100% renewables, we would still have what, 12 million in proceeds?
That was, maybe we could go back.
That
We
would
would
help me to
lose,
understand a lot.
that's for cumulative. So we already have some reserves built up. So I think going back to the next, one more slide back. So this would be in 2023, and again to the definitions, and that's,
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing it up. So the state considers renewable energy sources to be solar, wind, small hydroelectric, like the Cove Hydro project we have in Shasta County, or the Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District's hydro plant. Those are small hydro. So that counts as renewable. Biomass, biogas, dairy digesters, those count as renewable. The state does not count large hydroelectric projects or nuclear as renewable, but they do count in the state's terminology as carbon free. So when we say carbon free, it's sort of like some of the renewables are geothermal is the other resource that's renewable. And so some of the renewables are carbon free, some of them are not carbon free. The carbon free, you know, putting air quotes around that is really limited to things that don't meet state renewable requirements, but that don't have direct sort of greenhouse gas emissions from fossil sources. So large hydro, nuclear. The board adopted a policy of not procuring nuclear power. So for RCEA, when we say carbon free, we're really just meaning hydropower that doesn't qualify for the state renewable portfolio standard. So that's the yellow is anything that meets the state renewable portfolio standard, and then the gray is hydropower basically. And so that the 100% option, if we went to 100% in 2023, that would likely put the calendar year budget negative $6 million in the hole. The other options are obviously all in the black, ranging from 7 million in net revenue that would go to reserves up to 17 million that would go to reserves. And then the next slide is if we sort of take our current reserve level at the beginning of 2023 for these different options, where approximately, and again, there's other things that are factor into this, but this is sort of, from a relative scale for these options, our reserves would drop down to 12 because we'd lose $6 million this year if we went to 100% renewable. The other ones would add reserves that would bump us up, towards the goal of getting to 35 million in reserves.
Okay, thank you. And Chair Wu, may I ask one more?
Of course, yes.
Because I think we're all learning from your questions, so it's fine.
Perfect.
Fine.
Happy to help. So I'm curious why the staff recommendation is not to go for the 100% RPS and carbon free. Why are you leaning towards or recommending something different than that?
So I realize the line doesn't look too different between these options, but the underlying sort of challenge we had was our Sandrini solar project, got bumped out of this year. Originally, it was supposed to be online the beginning of or end of 2022. And then it's like, well, now it's looking like maybe hopefully sometime in 2024. A lot of other projects across the state are in the exact same boat, just due to supply chain and interconnection issues that we talked about in previous meetings. And so because everybody's in the same boat, the price of short-term contracts have become very expensive. And so whenever we're looking at anything, other than the far left option, we're basically doing short-term procurement for just from existing projects. So we're going to go and we'll track down some solar project that says, hey, we'll sell you some power, or we'll find a hydro project that says, hey, we've got some extra that we want to sell. People are pricing that extremely high right now, 250% above what it was last year. And so the question is, would we rather spend, let's go back to the calendar one. So, the difference between the current target and the linear target, let's say the 100% target and the linear target, that's getting up to $2+ million in that range. And so we could spend $2 million on, sort of a one-off, very pricey short-term procurement to make the bar graph look like one of those other options versus, so our power content label would look like one of these bars. And the price tag of the current targets versus the linear target is an extra like $1.8 million. And so the question is, would we rather have our power content label look like, let's just say the linear target or the current target? And if we don't do that, we would have $1.8 million to spend on customer incentives. So, we can say, let's give $1.8 million in rebates to low-income customers to put solar on the roof or whatever, the board could decide to spend that however we wanted. And so I think, the reason why staff's still recommending the linear target as opposed to like the other options is we do at the state level, there's a lot of attention paid to like who's hitting their goals, who's not hitting their goals. And even though we could probably not have an issue meeting our like compliance period targets if we didn't buy anything else, that would require us sort of underbuying this year and then, making it up next year at the end of the compliance period. And then part two of that is that would be counting on Sandrini coming online. And so if there was further Sandrini delays, then we would be like even more behind the 8 ball in 2024. And so kind of keeping us on that linear track will hedge against Sandrini delays in 2024 if they do happen. And then it would also mean that whenever the CPUC or the governor's office is looking at all the different load serving entities, they're not like our CEA is behind, but they're telling us they're going to catch up in 2024. They would say, oh, they're on track to meet it. And so it's sort of a policy political, decision. I mean, you're still buying the power. So it's not like this is just, paper energy. I mean, we still are contracting for these resources. It's just short-term contracts and they're existing resources, not new resources. And so the analogy I've used in the past when we talked about whether we backfill for Sandrini and how much, or for even just short-term contracts versus long-term new build resources is like, when we first launched the program, we didn't have anywhere to live. So we had to rent, an apartment. We had to rent resources on a year-to-year basis. And now we're building like our forever homes where we're actually building new projects that we're going to have for, 10, 20 more years. And so the question is how much, how nice an apartment do we live in until our house gets built? And, I think it's a balance. And again, none of these are bad choices. I mean, I would certainly recommend us against going in the hole because I think we need to build our reserves back up after the pandemic. But I think any of the other 4 options would be certainly workable. But I think balancing the sort of risk part of it as far as, what happens in 2024 and our overall compliance. And then, having the sort of, the policy level, like we're on track to meet our goals, not having to count on making it up next year. But within that, the prices are so high right now. It's like, if it wasn't $1.8 million to bridge that gap, it'd be one thing, but that's just a lot to spend to move the needle from, column 2 to column 3, which is like, you kind of have to squint to see the difference. And it's like, but that could be, a lot of customer programs or, putting it back into rate savings or putting it into reserves.
I mean, the big difference is like the mystery meat, right? I mean, that's what I see. And I don't actually know what that consists of.
It's mostly natural gas and probably actually hydropower. In California, the odds are it's natural gas generation and maybe some hydropower.
Any other questions from the board?
What if?
Go ahead, Jack.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So what if we went with the no additional RPS? That's $17 million of revenue, and that's 7 million more than R2. What if we use that 7 million to then invest in Humboldt County to increase our RPS here locally, build a solar farm? So then we could still be on track with our goals. Have you guys ever thought about that?
Yeah, so we wouldn't, I don't think it wouldn't help us with this compliance period because I don't think we'd have, things online, in 2024. But yeah, it would be another $7 million that we could put towards other objectives.
Okay, any other questions from the board?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, Matthew, one is we don't know what Sandrini is going to do yet. There is the possibility that we could lose out on Sandrini altogether if Sandrini doesn't get their stuff documented. Whatever the right way to say that is. We could lose out on Sandrini altogether. And then what does that mean to us long term?
We would have to go out and do a new, RFP for, long-term contracts. Because that's part of it is we have to have the renewables, but they also have to have a certain percentage of our portfolio in like 10+ year contracts. And so we'd have to make up that difference. We'd be in trouble because we wouldn't have that in time. So we'd be, we'd be out of compliance if that doesn't pull through. And then most likely the replacement project would be more expensive just because prices have gone up. So I think, I don't know, Richard, I think it's unlikely we'd get as good a deal as we have in that PPA if that project fails, because the market's just changed and there's just much more scarcity of projects available. We would still be able to backfill. We could meet our RPS requirement. It might be more expensive next year. It might be less expensive, but that's hard to say. I wouldn't probably bank on it being less expensive next year, but because there might be other people that are like, oh, we're at the end of the compliance period and now everybody's trying to like get their homework in at the end of the end of the day. And so, if Sandrini falls through, we're probably going to have more cost increases, but that is hard to predict.
Do we know where the other people that we're competing against are in their cumulative structure?
It's a range. I would say the CCAs on the whole tend to be ahead of the curve as far as their procurement, but other people are also having project delays. I would say like the direct access providers that like the Shells and the folks like like HSU buys from Cal Poly Humboldt. They tend to be like, we'll do the bare minimum to comply with this and sometimes kind of like wait till the end. So it's, and some CCAs are less, ambitious as far as their renewable goals. So I don't know. I could say like, we're probably in the middle of the pack as far as the first pie, the first bar graph of like the green and blue of like, where are we at in our goals? We're probably in the middle of the CCA and utility like compliance group.
Well, the direct access and local stuff, that's pretty minimal.
Yeah, right. It's.
I mean, like we're under.
There's
10 megs on that.
Yeah, around here it's not too much, and then it's not a huge slice of the overall picture. It's mostly CCAs and.
So where do we, if at the end of the day, doesn't RCEA have to supply all of the users in Humboldt County with power? I mean, there's not a place where you split apart and say, gee, we only have so much, so now PG&E can take half of it and we'll take half of it. We have to supply all of the users that are using RCEA power now. We have to continue to supply that to them. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so if we don't have it from these renewable or carbon free or whatever, we've got to get it somewhere. And where is somewhere?
So the default is like system power. So if we don't do anything, we'll be out of compliance with these different like regulations about renewables and all that. But the way that the California Independent System Operator is set up, like if we all just left on a boat to Hawaii and never showed back up, the California Independent System Operator would provide system power. So whatever we don't procure directly from another counterparty comes in as that mystery meat system.
Comes in on the grid.
Yeah. So, and they'll send us a bill for it, but they'll continue to provide it. So
They'll buy it. I mean, but at the end of the day, it's either for the customers up here, I understand what wheeling's about and how we're wheeling this power. But there's also, and I don't know if this board mostly has heard me say it, but you've heard me go on about this several times, and I've kind of got quiet about it. But there's a reality to what happens to this community and where the power comes from. It only comes from a couple of places. It either comes from Humboldt Bay Power or it comes across that Cottonwood line. It's only two places you get it. And that's the nature of Humboldt County. And that's why Humboldt Bay was built to the size that it was built, so that it could handle the full load of this county. And we can do what we want to do by having procurement and saying everybody's 100% green. I hope you feel good about that when your lights are off. Because if you're not buying natural gas, or you're not buying and essentially the grid power coming up, which in our case is probably not Terrigen, but the name of the one that's over there in Cottonwood. I can't think of their name right now, but they're the one, you know who I'm talking about.
Oh,
It's right in Cottonwood itself. It's right there on Highway 101 on I-50. That is a biomass 69 megawatt.
Anderson, yeah.
Farming.
I think it's Anderson. Biomass.
Liberator.
But they're shipping the power because of the way that the system goes. That's what comes over here. Essentially, it's the grid though, because they go up in the grid and the grid comes back and comes over Cottonwood to us. So what I would prefer to see is that we keep what we have in our reserve. Our reserves took a tremendous hit. You go back on your chart a couple of years ago, and it can swing violently. We're all competing for the same renewable or carbon-free energy. And there's a limited amount of it. Just like there's a limited amount of real estate to develop in this county because it's being built up. And the same thing applies to your power. If the guy that can pay more for it beats us out, and we've been, they put their money out there, they go higher, we lose out. And they're going to keep going to that, and they can probably have money to play with harder than we can. And so again, to take the reserves that we have and keep those that we have, and I'm not even so opposed to what Mr. Tull said, that we don't go over and get it off and get to 17 because we're buying it at the cheaper rate. Because next year, if it's 3.5 times the price, eventually we're going to be buying it off the grid. And whether or not we want to feel good about ourselves and say, well, we're all green, and now all of Humboldt County is green because we're wheeling it from someplace. But if you're going to be forced to buy that and lose 26 million this year and see what you might want to do next year, I would wait this out and find out what Sandrini's going to do. That's a big part of our basket, is what's going to be in the Sandrini basket. Hopefully they can get that fixed and then we can move on. But I actually like the one in column 1, but I'll go with the board's column 2. But I wouldn't go any farther than that.
Other questions from the board?
I kind of lost it at this point, but it might just be some thinking out loud too, just to kind of understand here. But so thinking in the sense that if we don't procure power from Sandrini and we lose this long-term contract and we're not following the state target when we find that out, I mean, I guess right now, I mean, are we getting some sort of pass in a sense that we are not hitting those long-term procurement goals because this contract is not active yet? And I mean, how does that impact us? If that makes sense.
So the long-term goal is different than like this RPS target. So there's
I more mean long-term contracts, not goals of that.
So we'd be out of compliance in a different way, so we could backfill for our like compliance period renewable percentage. I'm not sure, there's nothing we could immediately do about the long-term contract piece. I don't know, Richard, if you have any thoughts on like, if Sandrini just totally went, they just fail and say, hey, we're just throwing in the towel, or we're.
Yeah, just to clarify that this conversation has been mostly revolving around compliance with SB 100, Senate Bill 100, which just says how much renewable energy you have to have in your portfolio and doesn't really care how you're procuring it. And the long-term contracts issue is about Senate Bill 350. So that's the one that says we have to have at least 65% of our required renewables per the state standards, that SB 100, under these long-term 10-year or longer contracts. So we had expected to mostly make that compliance, actually entirely make it through the Sandrini contract once it's online. We did, when we kind of got early signs that there might be delays in the Sandrini project, was when we came to the board about turning our midterm contract for biomass into a long-term contract to hedge against falling short in that SB 350 compliance. So that's how we landed on having a 10-year contract for the biomass power. So it's not enough, though, to get that 65% that we need on its own indefinitely. So if there's, much longer delay or a complete fail on Sandrini, we will have to get a long-term contract somewhere else. And it would be very challenging to get a new build contract for something that could be online quick enough, save our bacon on that. So I think we would probably be shopping around for a 10-year contract with some existing project, maybe a small hydro project or an existing solar project.
Yeah, and I guess that doesn't necessarily have a ton to do, but a little bit to do with this topic in front of us today. But I mean, yeah, to me, it seems the most fiscally responsible and also still meeting, state targets to go with that second column there. So I don't know if we're gonna.
What happens if we are out of compliance? Like, what's the fiscal responsibility?
Yeah, so there's, I think it's a $50 or $55 per megawatt hour penalty. So that's, that's pretty hefty. That's, in the neighborhood of what, green power is selling for at these elevated prices that we're paying these days for new renewable energy certificates that we don't already have in our portfolio. But I think we've talked about this with the board, in some other contexts in the past. I think that the community choice programs like ours really need to be at least as concerned about kind of the reputational risk that goes with being out of compliance, because we've seen lately that the Public Utilities Commission likes to kind of use any kind of non-compliance as a stick to beat the community choice programs with. Recently, we've seen there are a couple of CCAs that are trying to expand their service territories modestly, just adding another city to their service territory. And the PUC is pushing back on that and saying, well, you're a bad actor. You missed your resource adequacy compliance, which is a different thing than this renewable portfolio standard. But I think they would probably give us the same kind of grief over this. So these CCAs are being threatened with not being able to move forward on their business plans. And the customers in those expansion communities are being denied access to community choice energy because the CPUC considers CCAs that are non-compliant on anything like this to be a bad bet.
Could we get a waiver? Since if Sandrini doesn't happen, could we say we had all intent to have this go forward, but the Trade Commission prevented this from happening and get a year?
We've had those conversations with CPUC Energy Division staff, and they don't seem interested.
Their approach, I think I said this maybe last week, but it's like they seem to be like the floggings will continue until morale improves, so it's like, we don't care if you can't buy it and nobody's able to do it. It's like, we're going to fine you anyway, even though you did everything you were supposed to do to get it online. But
I mean, to their credit, they are interested in helping us look for ways to get the logjam broken. So we've engaged, what's called the TED task force, and it's a joint task force of the CPUC and the Energy Commission and the Independent System Operator and the Governor's Office of Business. They're all working together in this task force to try to help load serving entities like us solve these problems that are holding up our projects. So they're saying, rather than forgive the penalties, we're going to help you try to not get penalized in the first place. So we've been in communication with them lately about the delays on getting the solar panels released by the customs.
Would the fines be more than $7 million per year?
I'd have to do the math, and I don't know if the fines are going to remain constant. I think with the increasing value of renewable energy certificates, I would expect them to probably adjust the penalties upward so that we don't have this sort of perverse incentive to say, well, it's cheaper to not comply.
Right.
I don't think they're going to let that situation last.
How many years away from, you said earlier that we were 20 years ahead of the state, of what the state is targeting or what we're supposed to be targeting. We're ahead. How far are we, like years wise, from going into non-compliance?
Well, the compliance period ends in 2024. So by the end of next year, we'll have had to have complied. We'll have to have procured enough renewables over the 4-year period from 2021 to 2024.
Maybe you can go back to the first graph with kind of, can just.
Then you start over again and you go 2020.
More in the hole if we went to the far left of that, not that one, Richard.
Yeah. So this one, it's not bracketed by compliance periods, but I can just tell you that the compliance period we're in right now runs from 2021 to 2024. And we did come in, low. We were actually below the yearly target in 2021. So we got off to a bad start in the current compliance period, but 2022 has gone a long way towards making that up. 52% there for 2022, or 51%. That's above where we needed to be in that year. So we're doing okay. We're making good progress towards hitting 2024 by the end of 2024.
Does each compliance period move with the previous 4 years? So
no, they're set blocks of time.
So when's the next one? Will start at 20?
Next one starts in 2025.
25 to 29.
Yeah, 28, I believe.
So just to look at this graph, so the first 4 years, we did great. We were fine. We were in compliance. The new period started 2021 through 24. We got a bad start. We did good last year, but it's like, well, if we do bad in 2023, then we have to do good in 2024. And that's where it's like, oh, we don't want to get behind the 8 ball in this 4-year period. And then again, in 2025 is a fresh start of a new 4-year period. So it's in these graphs. That's where they let you be behind 1 year and ahead next year. But you have to be within that 4-year block, but you don't get to carry forward. So if we had a surplus in 2017 to 2020, we didn't get to bring that into 2021 and the new period. That was just, hey, you did good last, your last period, but now you have a clean slate.
Contracts typically give the generator some slack like that too. They can have a bad year once in a while, like, hey, there was a drought, our hydro project didn't generate. And so they have to make it up in the next year or two, depending on how the contract's written.
Natalie has her hand up.
Actually, I want to go next.
Okay.
So in that bar, the graph, that bar that was the farthest to the left, right? That gave us that one. Yeah, the no additional RPS. If we chose that one, we would be farther in the hole, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so that would be one reason not to do that, even though we would have more money in reserve, which you guys know.
Out of the hole money wise.
Yeah. Okay, so then I understand that part. Okay, yeah, I'm good. Go ahead, Natalie. Oops, she left.
Yeah, she's have a little sneezing or coughing or something. Yeah.
Go ahead, Ellie.
And this may have already been answered, so excuse me if so, but
She's
so
back.
if we do choose the no additional RPS and Sandrini comes online, are we likely to level out and meet our goals in the 4-year period?
Yes, I think that. Yeah, I think we don't, I mean, that's one of the reasons that we're putting that up there as a viable option for the board to consider, because we do believe that barring, a really big delay in Sandrini, that we could still make our targets for the compliance period by the end.
And do we have much wiggle room then?
I'd have to go back and look. But there's some.
Speak under the wire, or we might just, we got a little bit of.
Right. Well, keep in mind that in 2024, we could come back to the board with a decision again to go out and buy extra renewable energy certificates if Sandrini's delayed.
Right.
And hopefully, this is a price bubble that might subside by next year. Who knows? So, Sandrini wouldn't be our only hope in 2024.
I feel pretty comfortable with no additional RPS at this point, personally.
Hang on, I think Natalie's next.
Yes.
Oh, can't hear you.
Thank you. I had a couple things I wrote down as y'all were talking. Sorry, I did have to step out to cough. So could you clarify the impact of on rates? I didn't quite track that. I think that was like the projected difference from PG&E rates or the percentage difference that.
It's not the difference between PG&E rates and ours. It's just how much we'd have to change them from what we're currently expecting to charge just by continuing to track PG&E with that 0.5% discount that we've had in place for the last few years. So this is just saying how much, if we were to try to basically, come out cost neutral relative to what the trajectory we're currently on per the board's action, this would be how much we'd have to adjust rates under those two different scenarios, either going to 100% renewables only or a blend of renewables and carbon free.
Okay. And then even if we're not buying more power from the local source at the Humboldt Bay plant, what's the emergency power situation there? I mean, can we get power from them if we need it? What's the deal?
Yeah, so there's Humboldt County is kind of in a unique situation where we actually know where our electrons are coming from because we have this very constrained grid. The rest of the state, it's just the market, and the power is going every which way. The way that it's managed is, you don't have to, you actually can't buy directly from a source. Like everything, we pay power plants to put power into the California market, and then we get credit for that. So, the PG&E plant, if the PG&E plant goes down, it doesn't matter what contracts we have, the lights are going to go out. Conversely, we don't have to buy anything from them. And, we could buy all of our power from Southern California and the lights will stay on because the state manages the grid as one big grid. And so, most people don't kind of have this very limited sort of topology of their grid where we know that there's only these two lines that come in and out and they're not big enough. But from a cost and reliability standpoint, those things are managed separately. So we don't have to pay PG&E to keep the lights on. The state does that. And conversely, we don't get any benefit from that other than the lights stay on. We have to go and contract elsewhere.
So to Frank's question, I think it was Frank, or point earlier, do we see any reliability benefit by having a long-term contract to procure power from the Humboldt Bay plant in particular?
No. So there's no benefit to, if we contracted directly with them, it would provide no increased reliability because they're going to get dispatched for reliability no matter what we do. And no matter, where we're buying power. So I think one thing though, to Director Wilson's point is if we want that plant to, burn less natural gas, we have to build things in Humboldt County or use less in Humboldt County because, we could build, 500 megawatts of solar outside of Humboldt County, and they're still going to dispatch the PG&E plant to maintain reliability no matter what we buy elsewhere. And so if we really want to remove natural gas from our local grid, we have to build, renewables here in Humboldt County.
Okay.
That was what offshore wind was about.
Yeah.
The big point of there's enough in the offshore grid amount that's allocated to somebody that somebody bought that would supply all of Humboldt County if it came through Humboldt County. And also the thought that it may not come through Humboldt County, they may come onto the mainland and go south and it not come through us. But if it came through us, then that would essentially, correct me when I'm wrong, that the PUC would be managing the electricity that came to the users. They would be managing the offshore wind.
Yeah.
So offshore wind has a huge impact. Where else are you going to get power? You're not going to get it from the biomass. I watched what we get on our financial statement. That goes down each month. And this is the time it shouldn't be going down. It should be going up because of the time of the year and where the sawdust is. But they're not producing. And there's a point where that plant, without some major retrofit, that plant will not continue to run forever way it is. And there used to be 3 plants, now there's 1 plant. So biomass is not going to be a huge option going forward. And the offshore wind is people put their thing in that, but I think we've talked, that's 2030. Is that probably a realistic date? And this is 2023. And so at the end of the day, you either end up with the reality to manage your grid comes through Humboldt Bay with natural gas, or it comes across the grid to from wherever they get that. But it's going to come across and that can't supply all our power, and neither, well, Humboldt Bay could, but the power coming across Cottonwood, I think it's limited to about 70 megs that would get over here. And we need 125, 135 megs to make this county run. Unless we do something internally. And that's where, if we do anything with our extra resources besides having a reserve, I would prefer to see that go into something that generates whether it's solar,
Right.
I'm out of options. What it's going to be to make power come out of this county and make it self-sufficient. And that has always been the issue with Humboldt County.
Yeah.
We have Jacqueline Har from TEA on, and she has some contextual information, and she has to jump off at 5. So if we could unmute her really quick.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Annie.
Hi, sorry. While I was listening in, I just heard a couple board questions that I knew I could get the answer to. So wanted to have the chance to do that since Richard, is in person in front of you guys and doesn't have a spreadsheet in front of him. If there was a question regarding whether where RCA would be in terms of compliance period 4, if Sandrini comes online as expected. If you were to continue with the current board adopted goal regarding RPS power for 2023, then you would end the compliance period, the full 4-year period, about 9% over procured for the year. That's on an expected basis. We do also stochastics around, what if it's a really bad solar year or load comes in higher or not, but 9% on an expected basis. If you were to choose to do no additional incremental RPS procurement for the remainder of 2023, then this math is a little tricky, but back of the envelope, I believe you would still have sufficient resources procured or renewable resources procured to meet compliance period 4, but it'd be very close, and we would probably recommend doing additional incremental RPS procurement next year, when hopefully the market price will decrease. And then just a couple other contextual questions or comments that I thought might be helpful for the board. One would be that we definitely want to hear what the board's overall goals are, and go out to procure on the basis of that. I will note that one of the reasons why energy prices for renewable energy have gone so high over the past maybe 4 or 5 months is because a lot of other CCAs and other load serving entities have had project delays, which means that everyone is out there looking for additional incremental renewables. So we would certainly go out to try to procure whatever the board suggests. I just want to note that it's a very tight market. It's very hard to find supply. It's unfortunately not something that you can just go to the grocery store and grab. So, there may be, some issue with just going out and getting that. And that also includes carbon-free energy. We are pursuing a number of different sources. Again, we'll do our best to find that, whatever the board targets for procurement, but just wanted to kind of throw that out as a note. And then my final note was just wanted to mention for some of the newer board members is that while we do have a relatively rosy net revenue forecast for 2023, which is pretty locked down, and additional rosy forecast for 2024 and 2025, a lot of that is dependent on what rates are set at for the coming years, and just on the basis, or primarily on the basis of rates, along with some market action we have seen forecasted annual net revenue swing by as much as 20 million in just a few years. So just want to mention that, if you're thinking about how you'd like to build reserves, with my fiscal conservative hat on, which is kind of how people end up being if they're working in the energy industry a long time, or at least folks in my shop. The more reserves, the better in terms of managing those sort of risks. And that's all I had.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing we haven't talked about, which is, and maybe I'm just kind of too risk averse or something, but there is a sort of an existential threat to RCEA, which is if we can't keep our rates lower than PG&E because we made mistakes or bad judgment in our power purchase agreements and didn't lock them down, and then people will opt out. And then we don't have our CEA anymore, and then we don't have any programs, and then blah, blah, blah. So I am worried about that a little bit, that we just really have to keep our eye on the ball of what how competitive we are in this market, and we have to have customers. So.
And I'll just say long-term contracts, excuse me, is, the best of both worlds, and that you get renewables and you lock in, favorable pricing. The Sandrini price is like a good price. Even our biomass contract, we're like making good money off of that contract right now. If we had 4 of those contracts right now, we'd be rich. Because market prices have gone so up. So, and again, those kind of stable long-term contracts both provide the environmental benefits, but they also provide the rate stabilization. So.
Okay, go ahead, Jack.
Do we get RPS credits when a Humboldt business or homeowner goes solar with batteries, or?
No, although we do get, it reduces our load, so we have to buy less, but we don't get, compliance value.
Is there any way we can get credit?
Not really, to be honest. There's some states where you can actually sell, like in Colorado, people could, you sell your renewable. So technically you don't have renewable on your house. You're buying brown power, but you're giving your solar to the utility, but there's not a mechanism to do that in California. So.
Okay. Are we pretty much done on discussion at the board level here?
Natalie has
one.
Oh, go ahead, Natalie.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Natalie.
I had just a couple more on my little list. If the cost of renewables may not go down, so it sounds like there's plenty of uncertainty, but especially with the Sandrini project, and Matthew, I think, mentioned that separate from that project, some things may go up because there's a lot of, but then I think there's probably a lot of uncertainty there. But would there be any benefit to buying more now, or do you really feel like right now is a special case where the market's just really out of whack? I realize this is speculative.
Yeah, I would say it's very out of whack right now, in that, the short-term prices are like way above what we'd be paying for, even expensive long-term renewable contracts. I mean, it's just a scarce market, so again, if Sandrini crashes and burns and goes away, then we're going to be in lots of trouble, and we'll have to sort of sort that out. But as far as 2023, assuming that it, still comes online, that it's a pretty, for something that's very limited.
Sure. And then I've heard a couple of references to a local solar project. Is there some kind of project in the hopper that I realize that would probably be a separate agenda item, but is there something that is a viable project in the works, or is this just sort of an idea that's just starting again right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different, so we have some projects that are in the works, and then we have one project that was in the works, and then the developer's kind of backing out, but that we could take on, and that's a permitted, I think 4 megawatt or so project that, has its permits and has a lease agreement. And so the developer, because of supply chain costs and various factors, is saying, I don't think we can make this pencil out, but they're willing to, basically hand off and, get compensated for the work they've done to date. But so, there are options to move things forward if we wanted to kind of say, all right, let's take that. Instead of spending it on short-term contracts, let's spend that on local, infrastructure that's going to be permanent. There's options to do that.
But that would potentially endanger our next kind of period of review at the state, essentially.
Yeah, that likely wouldn't be online in any time frame that would impact that, and also would be fairly small projects. If we're just taking 1 year of procurement and investing it in an infrastructure project.
Gotcha. Yeah, and then I just didn't know with the CCA business. I know that there's certain members that vote on this, but does everyone weigh in? How does that normally work?
Oh, I have an opinion. I can't vote, but man, I'm gonna have an opinion.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I thought I saw Jason back there too. I don't know. I just would be interested to hear from others.
It's only the cities and the county that have votes in the CCE business.
Yeah, I knew we were the only voters, but I just wanted to hear from our members that can't vote.
And those votes are weighted too, right? Aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you got the big vote, Natalie. No.
That does, seriously. So if there is no more discussion, I'll entertain a motion. And I've heard interest in going with the staff recommendation, but I've also heard some interest on the one that was the farthest to the left. So I'll entertain a motion.
Well, I'll make a motion for the staff recommendation because I just think going that far out of the hole and ditching renewables only for a year, hopefully, but still it's just a really big kind of out of whack with what we as a board have done before and as an organization kind of believe. So I'll make a motion to approve a reduced renewable procurement target of 41% for 2023 with the option to backfill 8% with carbon-free energy at the staff's discretion, depending on market availability.
So
I'm sorry, did you second yet?
I did. Scott did.
Scott did. Okay. Okay.
And do we take public comment? I don't think there is.
Did we take public comment?
We did not.
Let's take public comment. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes.
Thank
Yep.
you for asking. I see no public comment hands raised.
Thank you, Nancy. Go ahead, Natalie.
I mean, I'm new here, but I'll say this kind of pains me to walk back our targets. I understand the reasons, and I'm not in favor of the far left option. But I would be interested in seeing, where we could potentially act on new projects. I realize we'd have limited resources to do that with, but I would be interested in that coming back to our board. So even though it's a little, I don't think it's just, like numbers on paper. Buying renewable energy is really at the heart of this organization, and it is a market. And, I want there to be very clear demand for more renewables. And so, I think doing our part in buying them is creating, part of creating that statewide demand. But that said, I understand the circumstances, and, I'm supportive of staff recommendation, but I would definitely be interested in hearing about some of the other projects that we could push forward on. That would be a good way for us to, innovate in an area where we have limited options.
I agree. It was all, when you go back to the first strategic plan of this whole thing, it was about local renewable energy. That was the concept, Could
I say one more?
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
I also am very new, and I guess if our votes are weighted, I've got the tiniest vote.
Oh, I have the.
I got.
Go ahead, Lisa, I'm sorry. But I feel like the far left option is a vote for developing renewables locally. And so for that reason, that extra $7 million to me, and again, I'm not pricing out solar systems or rooftop this or anything, right? But $7 million could buy us a lot of rooftop solar. And so for my perspective, I'd like to put my money into local renewables, and I feel like a vote for that option could do that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, at the moment, we have a motion on the table. And so I believe help me through this. We call for the vote on that one, right? And then if that one doesn't pass, we can,
Or you could make an alternative motion to that one, and that would take precedence over the one on the table.
okay.
I mean, you could, if someone would wish to do that. Isn't that,
But we have a motion in a second. You have to vote if you have a second.
We have a motion in a second.
but if you do an alternate motion, that one takes precedence over the current motion, unless I misunderstand. Is Miss Diamond here?
So, okay, so I guess that,
Just asking you, is that how it works?
Yeah.
It does depend on what rules of procedure the agency has adopted. And I think, Director Wilson, that you are correct under Rosenberg's rules. But I don't think our CEA adopted Rosenberg's rules.
I don't think we did. Is Roberts rules?
Well, Roberts is not ideal, that it is a fallback of just parliamentary procedure. But I do think that it's easy for somebody to say, call the question, and there could be a vote on the motion that is pending. And we can have another conversation about adopting Rosenberg's rules.
I just got confirmation from Lori, Takeda, and Nancy that we did adopt Rosenberg's.
Oh, good. Thank you. So then, yes, if another motion is made and seconded, then the more recent motion does need to be acted on sooner. But I haven't heard a second motion or a second.
okay,
You could also take a straw poll and see who.
Do a roll call and then.
sure. Okay,
Decide.
that's a good idea. Thank you, everybody. So, go ahead, Nellie.
May I comment on what I believe it was Elise said?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I do fully hear you, and sorry, my dog's really intent on participating right now. I'm trying to push him down. I fully hear you, and I agree that I would love to see local investment. But I also heard staff say that might take more than, a couple of years, more, possibly more than the resources that we have, and we might be at risk of not meeting those state requirements. So that was that was my thinking in wanting to support the staff recommendation. But obviously we all weigh in and vote on this, but I just that was why I landed on something that I think is not ideal, but is gets us part of the way to most of the goals.
I just want to add that I totally 100% agree with you on that, Natalie, and just the idea that the staff recommendation option seems like the most financially best option, while still having some, risk management there to kind of bring us a safety net just in case some of these things don't happen, or these prices go up, or, these what ifs that are circulating this room.
Okay.
So. Yeah.
All right. So at this point, I mean, we can do straw poll, or we can just call for the vote.
I'll call the question.
Okay.
We did this a lot at Arcata City Council meetings. I see Nancy smiling, but yeah, let's call the question here.
Okay, let's do it then.
We need a second for that.
A second.
There we go.
Okay. So we need a roll call vote, right?
Please restate the motion. Is it?
It's the
Reduced
yeah.
renewable procurement target of 41%, 2023.
Does the 8%,
Second column.
does the 8% come off where does the 8% that we pick up? Where does that come?
So the idea is that if we were to do that additional procurement of carbon-free energy, it would bring us up to where the sum of renewables and carbon-free would be the same as the sum of carbon-free and renewables under your current goal, just that the blend of them would be tweaked so there would be less renewables and more carbon-free. If you go, there's a slide that illustrates that. If you go back. Yeah, so sorry
That's fine. Thank you.
yeah.
Okay.
I actually do have a clarification on the motion. I'm sorry. That slide says 2023 to 2025, but the motion itself as written is just for 2023. My understanding is that we're voting on something that is just for 2023 and we'll readdress this in 2024. Is that correct or is that not correct?
Yes, that's correct. The agenda item was just because we were also talking about kind of moving up the 2025 goals, but the motion just impacts 2023.
So for the remainder of the fiscal year or the calendar year?
Calendar year.
Gotcha.
Calendar year.
Okay, thank you.
That was a good catch, Natalie.
One more question.
Yeah. Mhm.
I have no idea where we are in terms of opinions. But it seems like there is a split. Is there an option to come back next month with another option to split the difference? So
But then there's really no point in that because we're not meeting the state targets and then we're not also taking all this money. So I just don't see necessarily the utility in that. Because the point, I think, of this specific motion is to meet the state targets. So we are in compliance.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we're not supposed to ask more questions.
Yeah.
We're violating around Rosenberg rules right now, but I don't know.
I would like to call for a roll call vote.
Director Arroyo,
Yes.
Director Bauer,
Yes.
Director Jorgensen,
Yes.
Director Mobley,
Yes.
Director Scrafani,
no.
Vice Chair Schaefer,
Yes.
Director Tuttle,
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, everybody. That was an energy intensive.
I'm sorry, folks, no.
Okay, so, but we do, let me ask you this, Matthew, for new business, 10.1, is this something that we need to do today?
Yes, 10.1 and 10.2 are pretty cool. So
Okay.
I didn't expect that to be quite as fierce.
Yeah, well, no, but you know, people,
It's good. I think
It
we all
is.
learned a lot. too.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so we are now on to, there's no old business, so new business is item 10.1. And it's the salary and benefits schedule update. Is there a staff report first?
Yes.
And I'll just preface it with the recommendations in here are what was reviewed and recommended by the finance committee. So it's gone through one vetting with that group.
And I will try to make this brief, just conscious of your time and that we did present this in April. And then we've also met with the finance subcommittee and discussed this. So just reiterating what we brought to the board in April, every 2 years, we do a salary survey with labor market agencies. During that survey, we found that we were 12% behind the average salary, excluding the executive director's salary. The executive director's salary greatly skews the average. It would be much higher than 12% if we included that salary. Just for reference, you know, we use a combination of PERS and non-PERS agencies. For those of you that are familiar with this California retirement system, if we were to take out our labor market agencies that are PERS, we're actually 28% behind, which are our CCAs that we have in our labor market agencies. And we are seeing that CCAs in the state of California after COVID are offering full remote positions. And we're finding that they're our greatest competitors, that people that live in Humboldt can go work. You know, just as an example, in San Diego, making San Diego wages and work fully remote. And that
Aisha, our policy director, just accepted a position in San Diego that's like a $50,000 a year raise, and she can live in Arcata. And so kind of a no-brainer for her.
And then the 12%, we saw that the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, was 13.5% increase from the last time we looked, and the Social Security Administration COLA was 14%. Thanks to the board's suggestion, we did a survey of staff to see what was important to them. We asked them, we laid out 6 different options of differences in benefits and pay, and 54% said higher salary was the most important. Second was paid time off, and then a third was an increase in retirement benefits. We presented the finance subcommittee 3, options for salary increases. Everything that we presented to the finance subcommittees in the packet. But for brevity, we've included the 14% and 12% here for the board. And the annual increased amount to RCA's budget for those increases. So 14% using our existing staff would be roughly a $432,000 increase, and 12% a $370,000 increase. So RCA's existing retirement benefit exists of a 457B. RCA contributes 4% of an employee's salary with up to a 3% match. And the employee can also contributes into that 457B. 457B plans, for those of you that aren't familiar, have an annual maximum contribution set by the IRS each year. So the annual contribution right now is set at $22,500 for an employee. Every labor market agency, and then even our agencies that we looked at that were in our area, our member agencies that offer 457Bs, also the employer contributes into a 401A, and the employees contribute into a 457B. This allows employees to put away more, so that they don't. With the 2 combined amounts, that max is pretty low. And we have a number of employees now that max out that contribution each year. So what we presented to the finance subcommittee is that we're recommending adding a 401A plan and shifting RCA's contribution into that plan, and then maintaining the 457B for employee contributions, which would allow employees to be contributing more to their own retirement. Additionally, all of our non-PERS agencies that we looked at are contributing at least 10% into retirement contributions, and we're at the maximum 7%. So what we presented to the finance subcommittee were 2 options. One was to increase our contribution up to 10%, and one was to leave the 7%, but contribute a flat $4,000 a year for each employee. And the reason we did this was from an equity lens. When we increase a percent, the higher paid employees get a much greater benefit than our lower paid employees. Whereas this 4,000 contribution will benefit all our employees the same. And I looked at what that actually means per, classification. This for our lower paid employees that have maybe less disposable income to put towards their retirement, it almost doubles what they're getting to put away towards their retirement. But it benefits, all staff. And then longevity was brought up at the board meeting, and that was one of the items that staff were interested in pursuing. We had a number of scenarios that we presented to the finance subcommittee, but just for example, we compared Humboldt Bay Municipal Water District's longevity plan with a flat rate And again, we do like the flat rate because it is across the board benefit and not a greater benefit to higher paid employees. This would be every year once someone reaches the 5-year, they would get that additional flat rate amount. And then, you know, it would increase with their years of service. So the Board Finance Subcommittee made the following recommendations based on what we presented them. They recognized that our 12% is a looking back number, and to stay competitive in the market, they thought a 14% was a good recommendation to bring to the board for a salary increase effective July 1st. They agreed that they thought it was a good idea to add a 401A plan and increase RCA's contribution by $4,000 a year. They liked the flat rate proposal. We looked at additional paid holidays, and based on input that we got from the board, they recommend adding the Juneteenth holiday and then adding the flat rate longevity plan of $1,000 per year with employees for 5 to 9 years of service, $2,500 per year for employees with 10 to 14, and $3,500 per year for employees with 15 or more years of service. And so just kind of to put this in context, I know last year, you know, it's hard to make a decision on this before we've talked about the budget. So just to put it in context, we put these recommendations into the budget that you're going to see in the next item. And with those additional costs towards salary and benefits, we're estimating a net revenue of $9.59 million for next fiscal year. Okay, and so with that, maybe I went too fast. If Matthew has anything to add, or I'll turn it over for questions.
I just wanted to add a little bit more on what Eileen said, just from our subcommittee meetings. I know you had asked about it, Sherry, too.
Yeah.
And just the idea to me, and I think what we were thinking is that with that survey of employees, salary was obviously significantly the most, you know, important to staff, and to have that kind of retention and attraction, you know, to get people to work here like we were talking about, and to be competitive with these other agencies. And like Eileen said, to stay ahead, because that's looking back on the past years. And, you know, we know everybody, I mean, with a COLA adjustment that is sitting around over 14%, that like, you're probably going to see significant increases in similar agencies across the board. And so, and I think, you know, going for that 14% kind of as a trade-off with some of the other, the longevity pay and other things that we talked about, the paid holidays and things, to kind of put that money in that category, instead of some of the other things that we talked about, I think is, you know, just, and it speaks volumes to employees as well, I think, to see, you know, a bump like that, and raises morale and makes everybody, you know, feel maybe a little bit better about the economic state of the country. So.
And just, you know, the reminder to reiterate that the board's policy is we do this every 2 years, not every year. And so we're kind of looking back over like, well, what has been the increase over 2 years? And then we're sort of catching up. And so,
yeah,
sort of
So we're doing a percentage plus a flat 4,000?
Our existing percentage, and which is lower than our comparable agencies. So we're doing 7% now. Most agencies are doing 10. And so we're doing the flat plus the up to 7%. For retirement.
Seems quite a bit.
So let me go back.
I'm familiar with it because of Humboldt.
Yeah, so the 10%, the cost to the agency, if we matched what the other retirement contributions are, was $100,000. To do the flat and maintain the 7 was $32,000 more per year to put it.
Yeah, I'll just say as being on the finance committee, it's a tight labor market. You know, people can work remotely. I mean, we have to be competitive, you know, And this is, and with inflation, I mean, this is, gives people a little more money in their pocket. I mean, we all know how expensive everything is. To me, it's the cost of doing business and retaining good employees. We have to do this. Nobody likes spending money, but we value good employees, and it's going to still be hard, I think, because you can work remote and work for San Diego. I mean, whoever would have thought that was possible, but I think it was, Frank, I don't have anything to say, but it seemed like it was a sound budget, a sound budget or sound fiscal policy to do this. And it doesn't do too much to our overall budget.
And just to add on the retirement piece too, I mean, especially with that flat rate, I mean, the talk about, being more equitable to starting out employees, and that goes to the longevity too. If you can say, oh, well, I'm going to get this $4,000 towards my retirement every year and I just started here. I mean, that's going to keep employees too. So.
And just for context, I think it's about it, the manager, director, and executive director, the left column, we get more than 4,000, and then but if, so on the right-hand side, it drops it down to 4,000 for the managers, directors, and myself, but then it bumps up the more entry-level people significantly.
Any more comments or?
Yeah,
Frank?
First I want to say that the way that RCEA has this internal staff that analyzes this budget or the wage thing every 2 years, I think is pretty unique. I don't know if it's unique to other cities because I'm not in all those, but it certainly is to our city. The way they compile this and give it to us, it made it clear. Some of the stuff is confusing. The 401k type deal, because the employees were, if they wanted to contribute, they were maxing out because of what was going in there. And by the way that you changed it on the 401k, they're able to still, they would have put more in, but they couldn't. Now they can put more in to their retirement. And it appears to this generation is looking into the future of retiring, of what that is. My generation, at least from where I was at, didn't look real good at that. And I mean, we're paying the price. And so I want to commend the committee for doing that. And to back to what Sarah was saying, that and Scott, by getting ahead of this curve, instead of always being behind it by 2 years, and then we catch up, and then we do this again. Now, if we can get a little bit of ahead of it, because all the agencies are coming after the employees. And this is there's parts of our CCA thing that's pretty unique. I mean, it's a confusing, on a good day, it's a confusing entity. And then to have people that are in there filtering that out and give us this information so that we can try to make an informed decision is a big deal. We want to let them learn the curve and keep them. So again, it's what we recommended, and I still support all of the recommendations.
Thank you, Frank. Anybody else from the board? Go ahead, Skip.
I probably will go along with what the Finance Committee recommends. I am on the committee and I was unable to make the meeting, so that would be one reason. And this is a minuscule part of the overall budget. I know that. But to play the other side, just some observations I have. I agree with the overall competitive nature and our need to attract employees for sure. We have great employees from what I can observe over 5 months. And is it a question first? Is it our goal to have a 35 million reserve within a couple of 2 years? Okay, and that's made up of the balance we'll have at the end of this year and next year. we expect to equal 35. I'm a bit nervous about meeting that goal. Few years ago, we were borrowing, from what I understand. So, and there's a lot of anticipated income. So it makes me a bit concerned. How many employees, FTE, do we have? I'm about 33 or 35. Okay. So the total increase to the personnel budget would go from 4,071,000 to about 5,426,000, about a 33% increase. Just so I think roughly.
And that's also added positions, not just.
Ask the next.
Yeah, and
Right.
That's like, yeah.
Okay.
About 350 plus benefits, but it's a good increase. The salary package at 14%, with a rough average of 12,500 per employee, a step at the average of 2,250, retirement 4,000, longevity, you just take 2,500, and a payday, I don't know what that total, but roughly that comes up to a minimum, and it's over a 2-year period of 21,250 per employee. So that's, again, just an observation. And I'm wondering too, a question about sick days. How are sick days used, and can they be used for personal days?
we have a little bit of an expanded sick leave policy. We call it wellness leave. And so it's not personal day as in the sense of like a vacation day, but we do recognize mental health, burnout as a day. If we see someone out walking in the marsh and they're on a wellness day, that's okay, because we want to keep people that are healthy in mind and body.
Got it. But that's 12 days, essentially in addition to vacation. So can those days be accumulated
So
over the years?
our wellness leave is accumulated. There's no cap, but we don't cash it out when an employee leaves. And our wellness leave also includes the use of that for family, to take care of a family member. And we don't limit the amount that someone can use of their wellness leave to take care of a family member.
Okay. Well, I just thought that that's my background. I come from the other side. So I thought there were some observations that we should just be aware of, and that the public knows that we're paying attention to. As I said, I have faith in the finance committee, and each of you have talked, so I'm ready to go with their recommendation.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, overall, it was beginning to feel like we're going for the whole thing in 1 year. And there are some concerns about how we may build reserves over that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Skip.
The US economy is going for it all in 1 year too. So I don't know. Why not?
Go ahead, Jack.
What's the turnover rate at RCA?
I think it's pretty low. I don't know what the average is. I would say that you definitely have, folks that have been there for, some that have been there longer than me. And I've been there 12 years, and we've got folks that are in kind of the 10-year, 5-year bracket. So I think, overall, I think we have pretty good longevity, but we do see. I think it tends to be more at the like entry level to, manager level that are like, oh, like I can make more than Matthew if I remote work in San Diego and do my exact same job, without any increase in responsibility or duty. So, that's not a tough choice to make for somebody that's, good. So I think, sometimes we're a little bit of the farm team for like the bigger CCAs, and we're never going to get entirely away from that. We're not going to be Silicon Valley. But I think, for me, taking me out of it, the fact that if we, from an agency standpoint, we don't offer PERS. And so we also have no liability when a person leaves, or when a person retires, they're gone, and we don't have any financial obligation. And so when you looked at the non-PERS labor market entities, which are CCAs, but also like the SHOT Center, it's not just other CCAs, we're like 28% behind, again, leave me out of it, like, not just 12%. And so, I think a lot of those entities that don't offer PERS are saying, well, we got to pay people more because they got to save for themselves for the most part, as opposed to having that guaranteed benefit, when they retire until they, move on the next plane of existence.
And just for your question about retention of our 33 employees, we have 10 right now that would qualify for 5-year longevity. We have 3 that have been with us for 10 years or more, and only 3 that would qualify for the 15-year. So about a little less than half our staff are under 5 years.
I'll just say real quick, I work for a PERS agency, and we have state scientists, and we haven't had a raise for 3 years. And it's super difficult to recruit.
Let's talk about teachers too. Yeah. It's not, it's not. Okay. Well, and just to add, to that same point and what Matthew was saying, just anecdotally, I went and looked up some of those jobs at Marin or in San Diego, all the CCAs, and oh yeah, they pay good. You can do them remote. And I was like, man, maybe I could even apply for it. I'm probably qualified at this point. So, that is an issue for sure for retention. So.
Yep.
All right. Anybody, Natalie, do you have anything or, okay. So I think we're done up at the board. Is there anybody, public here in the room that would like comment, questions? Seeing none, Nancy, is there anybody online?
No public comment.
Okay. I'll bring it back up to the board. Any last questions or comments? Go ahead, Natalie.
I just, I think this is great, and I appreciate folks putting this together and the finance committee for their role in this. And I do understand that it's a lot at once, and I think all of our agencies are kind of rushing to catch up with the competitiveness of this ongoing job market that favors the job seeker. So I think it's worth it to try to incentivize some retention where we can, and recognizing that we're still probably going to lose some folks if they want to change, and that's okay too. So thank you for your work on this.
Thanks, Natalie. I'll add pretty much the same to that. At the Water District, we do it every year. And when I look back at it, would add up to 14% from last year and what is projected for this year. We haven't approved the budget yet, but about the same. I think remote work, which was, largely due to COVID. I mean, there was remote work before, but now that it's so accepted, the job market is just chaotic right now. I mean, we're finding that too in engineering professional services. It's just the pay scales are kind of all over the place, and where you live is just there's no real connection between them anymore. So, okay, if there's no other comments from the board, do we have a motion?
I will make a motion to approve items 1 through 5 as outlined in 10.1 salary and benefit schedule update.
I'll second.
Oh, yeah. Give it to Natalie.
Okay, give it to Natalie. Okay, roll call vote.
Director Arroyo,
Yes.
Director Bauer,
Aye.
Director Jorgensen,
Yes.
Director Mobley,
Yes.
Director Scafani,
Yes.
Director Schaefer,
Yes.
Director Tuttle,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Chair Wu,
Yes,
Director Myers is absent. Motion passes.
thank you. All right, next up is some possibly new staff positions.
Yeah, and also just the first pass at the coming year's budget. And so I realize folks are probably starting to glaze over, so keep it focused and isn't adopting the budget, although it's trying to get hopefully the staff part of it sorted out so that we can finalize that for the budget that we will bring back in June. So just to go over the high level, we've been using basically the energy revenue and expense costs from our financial model. The TEA updates on a daily basis, but we kind of had to pick a time. So we've been working with May 5th. If that wildly changes between now and June, we would probably want to, think about updating that. But if usually it kind of wiggles around, but doesn't change. So, but that's where the big numbers, which are the energy numbers, are based off of that May 5 snapshot. And then the budget actually includes the current targets. So our earlier discussion to drop those down a little bit, this is still the more expensive option. So we can update this accordingly with that decision from earlier in the meeting. But this is right now, it has the higher priced option in there. And then it includes the Sandrini project coming online in April. We're hoping it'll still be sooner than that. It could be worse than that, but right now it's included in the model for sort of the tail end of the fiscal year. But and then the big sort of numbers are the electricity sales revenue is up from this year's budget by a significant amount, but so are, not coincidentally, wholesale power costs. And so those two things obviously kind of track, and power prices have come up quite dramatically in the last couple of years. So just big picture, electricity sales is really our main budget driver. And then the power purchase agreements, that's really just revenue from our long-term contracts. So really you could kind of lump that into sort of power overall. And then the other 10% of our budget that isn't sort of the CCA program is grants and contracts. And so that's about 10% of our revenue is projected for the coming fiscal year. And I'll break that down a little bit more in a minute. And then on the expenses side, wholesale power, again, the lion's share of our budget is dominated by that. The facilities and operations budget, there's a chunk in there that I'll talk about as far as what's different between this year and next year. Professional and program services, that includes all of our data management services and TEA and the credit solution that TEA provides for instance, that's about 10% of our budget. Incentives and rebates to customers, personnel. So, and this again, right now it includes the things that were just approved and also the recommended additional positions. And so that's about, a little less than 5.5% of our total budget is staff. And then communications outreach, program expenses, non-operating costs are little slivers. As far as kind of some big things that are different, so the rural REN, which is the statewide energy efficiency program that if funded, we will be the administrator for. So we'll have some of the implementation dollars, we'll have the admin dollars, and then we'll be passing through funding to other partners across the state if that receives funding. We're hoping that there'll be a decision, or at least a proposed decision this summer, where we'll have a little bit more certainty. You know, this could be up to, $90 million over a 5-year period, depending on what gets approved. That's what we requested. We'll see what the final approval is. And then, some of the revenue will be funding basically our current DSM, demand side management, our energy efficiency teams, which is our biggest staff team. So there'll be, funding that'll pay for them to do the work that they do, providing technical assistance to customers and helping people implement energy programs, providing incentives. And then about $7.5 million in the budget are pass-through funding to those other statewide partners. So not directly benefiting kind of Humboldt County, but we'll be receiving the funds and then passing it through if it's approved. And we're anticipating that whatever is approved would be funding beginning in January, since this would be like a calendar year basis. A lot of our funding and our programs are on a calendar year basis, even though we have a fiscal year. On the personnel side, the bottom part of this is what we just talked about. The top part is that there's proposed additional positions. One would be a finance specialist. So in our finance department has basically a director, a finance manager, a grants and contracts manager, and a coordinator support position. And so this would add an additional sort of specialist to help manage the overall administrative functions on the finance side. And in particular, if we get the rural REN funding, which we anticipate, there's going to be a lot of just like contract management of administering that potentially, $90 million in funding. A customer service associate position, which would really be just additional like front office support, answering phones. We get a lot of calls, and a while ago we discontinued our call center service to bring that in-house. And so this would add a person that would just be dedicated to answering customer calls. And then beginning with, a little bit into the year, hiring and for a manager and a specialist to administer that rural REN program as far as the admin part of the rural REN budget. And so if, on the spreadsheet, there's a column that's rural REN admin. It's in, sorry for the online part of this, but under the purple demand side management, there's rural REN admin, and then there's rural REN implementation. And so the admin part is us administering it statewide, and then the implementation is actually doing the programs. And so that is us doing programs. And then there's the $7.5 million that would be us passing through funding for other people to implement programs in the San Joaquin Valley and in the Sierra Nevada region and other areas. So the rural REN manager and specialist would be the overall staff to manage that. And then the last proposed position would be adding an additional infrastructure project manager position. We have a one full-time and one temporary person supporting that. And that's working on, transportation initiatives, the microgrid work we're doing, and looking at other kind of, community infrastructure projects. The 3 bullets there are what was just approved. So that's included already in this budget. And then just as a note, the personnel budget is about 5.4 of the total budget. All these changes increase the total RCA budget by about 1.3% to add these positions, and then the compensation changes. There's 500,000 under facilities for our quest for a permanent home, and this was hopefully be sort of the purchase of a property and some site development costs. It's sort of a placeholder number, but just since hopefully we're getting closer to actually pulling the trigger on something, we wanted to include that as a budget line item, so it's captured here. And then also included 200,000 for technical analysis of just the local grid and issues and opportunities. I think, as you all know, there's been a lot of sort of challenges with both reliability and interconnections. And, we're kind of at the mercy of PG&E and what information they make available. And so we wanted to have some resources to be able to get a better handle in our own information on that, as well as to be able to have resources to potentially kind of engage on solutions around the grid. And so we didn't want to under-resource that, since it's such a challenging kind of area in the community. And there's also been, discussions about, taking over the grid and forming a co-op potentially, and, just having more understanding of really what the value and issues and condition of the grid is would be useful. And then this currently reflects maintaining the current rate discount. Obviously can be changed whenever the board would like, but right now it's sort of consistent with the rate discount. And just as a reference, since we've launched the program, we've delivered a bit over 6 million in customer rate savings across the county. So, I always like to remember that we're a government agency that costs negative dollars to Humboldt County. So it's been the bill for our program has been negative $6 million to ratepayers. So on the revenue side, just to give a little bit more detail, the electricity sales current budget compared to this draft, as noted, prices have gone up and rates are, anticipated to go up. So this are basically tiered off of our rate forecast for PG&E rates. The grants and contracts piece, the big jump from 1.6 to 11 is the rural REN, approximately 9 million, a lot of that being pass through dollars. But that's why that number is much larger. We have a couple smaller California Energy Commission grants, and we'll continue to have our PG&E contract for supporting energy efficiency work. And then the program related service fees is a small number, but that's like, people using our EV charging network and paying for electricity while they charge. On the expense side, again, the wholesale power budget has gone up, and this factors in the Sandrini delay, as mentioned. The personnel budget is going up, as discussed, and that's the compensation package that was approved, plus also the new positions that are being proposed. And then there's also just a buffer in there for people's sort of annual merit increases that they get at their, performance evaluation time. The facilities operation, the two big things that have changed compared to last year. We got grant funding for expanding our EV charging station network in some more remote areas. And so implementing that grant funding, which is on the revenue side, and then the 500,000 for the office relocation effort are in that line item. So that's why that went up. And then communication outreach, the jump there is pretty entirely due to there's a marketing budget for the REN program, which is sort of statewide marketing that we'll be administering. And so that's why there's a big number there. It's for that statewide outreach. And then again, that's passed through. So there's revenue for the rural REN program that would be coming in, and then we'd be administering it, but it's administering it statewide. So it's a big number because it's across the whole state of California, or at least large swaths of the rural parts of California. And then the professional program services, there's 7.5 million that's passed through to the other regions through the REN, and that's why it's a big number. And then there's also that 200,000 I mentioned for grid analysis. Everything else is approximately kind of the same ballpark as last year. The program expenses is down. That really relates to, in the past, we've budgeted some of the utility taxes, and they're really just pass through numbers. So like the Arcata utility users tax, there's state taxes that basically, we collect and then pass on. And so rather than including that as a expense, it's just based like a wash up in the revenue side, because it's not really money it's not our money. It's like we collect Arcata's money and then we cut Arcata a check and it just goes, right through. And so it's basically The remaining amount is predominantly the fees we pay to PG&E to do their part of the CCA operations, which is a state required thing. And so it's basically the same numbers last year. We're just not counting some of it in our expenses since it's a wash anyway. And then the incentives and rebates, that's really just kind of maintaining pretty much where we're at for customer rebates. And then the non-operating cost is not substantively different. The two things that are really in that line item are the loan interest for our USDA loan that was our part of the airport microgrid. And then the rural REN program has like a small sort of micro loan component of it. And so there's funding in there that would be sort of the seed funding for that loan program, the customer program. So it would be money that we'd be administering, but providing like a loan fund. And so that's again, passed through from the rural REN funding that would be coming in. And so the bottom line, it bumps up the budget a bit. So revenue's up, expenses are up. The net of that is a little bit down. And then again, this all reflects not the new direction on procurement. So that would increase the net revenue. And, you know, this would be going towards our reserves unless the board designates it for anything else. So, and we're still trying to get to, I think I have one last slide. You know, the numbers are small on this, but the blue line is sort of our you know, money in the bank over time. And then the two lines, the bottom line was our target, the low end of our reserve target, and the upper one was our upper end of our reserve target for the first 5 years. So those are the sort of brackets we set where we want to have reserved. And if you'll notice, we sort of were wiggling around right in the middle of those two. If you did a trend line up until the pandemic, we were kind of like, just sort of, okay, we're kind of trending right between our upper and lower bounds. And then obviously we got hammered with sort of the massive prices and the pandemic issues, but we're hopefully going to be back. Well, we are back above the sort of the low water mark, and the goal is to kind of keep moving up towards that 35. And so
What's the on the x-axis, what's the farthest to the right? I can't read that.
yeah, and I wasn't trying to get too into this.
I just wondered.
That's January 1st, 2023. So
That's 2020.
yeah. So the zigzaggy part is like real numbers, and then once it's the last part of it is kind of
Gotcha. Okay.
adding. So this is kind of this is kind of as close to the end of this fiscal year as we have. So this is kind of like where we're at now, and we want to keep going towards the
Gotcha.
so. So process wise, as we talked about, the finance committee met, and then today we're looking for any input or direction, and then we'll finalize and refine the budget. If necessary, if there's a lot of input or things that we need to kind of dig deeper into, we can have a second finance subcommittee to review those. And then if that's needed, or if not, either way, we'll be back in June with a proposed final budget for adoption.
Right.
And so the action would be to provide any input on this if you want us to make any substantive adjustments on kind of the approach or assumptions. And then if the board is interested in finalizing these positions, then we can, bake that into the final version. And again, this is the list of them. Some of them would be starting later in the year, contingent on like the REN financing or the REN funding coming through. And then the manager, we were proposing to have them have a little bit of ramp up. So if we get awarded the funding, we'd look to hire them in October so that they can kind of hit the ground running. And then the program would begin in January, and similar for the positions of the REN specialist and the infrastructure program would be would be later in the year.
Okay, so how about first, if you can go one slide back, I'll first ask the board if there's any guidance or input on the budget. Ready?
Finance subcommittee did such a good job. Just kidding. The staff did such a good job.
No, thank you, subcommittee. That's really.
And how about online? Any questions, comments on the budget first? Nothing from Natalie. How about I'll take it out to the public? Anything on just this part about the budget?
Nope, I see no input.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. About the,
I think that one.
Julie.
that one. Okay, so we're looking at these staff positions and Matthew, you did say that the rural ran the 3 and 4, that those are contingent on getting that.
Yeah, if
Funding.
that doesn't, I mean, it's not like a grant that we're like, oh, we're crossing our fingers. I mean, it's sort of a formal
Okay,
process. So it's highly unlikely that we won't be getting some funding. We don't exactly know what that amount will be. But obviously, if for some reason it didn't come through, we wouldn't fill those positions.
all right. Any other questions from the board on these staff positions? Go ahead, Skip.
Will we hear about REN funding by July 1st, or do you have a date?
We don't know exactly, we're at the whim of the Public Utility Commission. They've gone through a lot of the rounds of public comment. It's not even public comment. It's like they have stakeholder engagement sort of process. And so at this point, it's not just our program. So it's like the budgets for all of this different programs for energy efficiency. And so, that's why it takes a while, because they're trying to look at all these different things, but it should be out this summer because they need to get it out and published so that people actually can implement starting in January. So, and again, all of the other programs are like on the same timeline. So it would be very disruptive if they didn't figure out what the budget numbers were in time, because they can't wait till the last minute and then just say, okay, every single program across the state doesn't know what their budget is. So it would be unlikely that we wouldn't hear by July or August.
You never know. State. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments on the staff positions here? How about you, Natalie? Nothing?
Nope, looks good.
Okay, I'll take it out to the public then. This is talking about the staff positions.
No public comment.
Okay, and nobody in here either. So, do we have a motion?
I'll move that we approve the 5 staff position.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Director Arroyo,
Yes.
Director Bauer,
Aye.
Director Jorgensen,
Yes.
Director Mobley,
Yes.
Director Myers is absent, Director Scafani,
Yes.
Vice Chair Schaefer,
Yes.
Director Tuttle,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Chair Wu,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you. All right, next up, staff reports 11.1.
I think we can save Core Hub Offshore Wind community engagement for another meeting, but I will just tell you one thing is that last week we won 2 awards for our microgrid project. So there's an annual microgrid knowledge conference, which is the microgrid conference that they move around the country. So it's like a national, international conference. Won one of, I think, microgrid of the year awards for our microgrid.
Yay.
And then the Cal CCA annual conference, which is the California Community Choice Association, the trade association of all the CCAs, which there's about, I think, 25 CCAs across the state now that serve like 11 million people. We're like the smallest standalone CCA, I believe. And they launched CCA Impact Awards, and we won in the resilience category. They had resilience, equity, and decarbonization, and we won the resilience award for microgrid. And so we've got a couple shiny hunks of glass in the office now. But it was good because I think it's a recognition that our work that we're doing here is not just of local relevance, but it's actually kind of cutting edge work that people across the state and actually across the country and the world are saying, hey, that's valuable and helping move the needle on these issues. And I told my CCA colleagues that I hope they don't resent us since we plan to win one of those 3 awards every single year, you know. There'll be 2 left for everybody else to compete.
Thank you, Matthew. Comments from the board?
That's
Mm,
awesome.
Yeah, staff,
Yes.
staff is killing it.
Yep. Love it. How about I'll take that to the public?
No comment online.
All right. Thank you, staff. Yay. Woo.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
End the board.
Okay.
Round of applause.
And a round of applause for the adjournment too.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. That was a productive meeting. I think we all learned a lot. There's just so much to this portfolio, right? There's so much to know, but we'll get
They've
there.
gone longer.
Yeah, we'll get there. Okay, so meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.